From the View My Sports studios, it's The Breakdown with your hosts, Roger Tillis and Chuck Olesker.
Today's guest on The Breakdown is volleyball coach John Dwyer of Episcopal High School out of Jacksonville, Florida. Hi, thanks for tuning in to today's edition of The Breakdown. I'm Roger Tillis, your host, here with Chuck Olesker, the co-host, and today we have got a fantastic guest. We're very excited to have volleyball coach John Dwyer from Episcopal High School in Jacksonville, Florida, joining us here on the show today. John, thanks again for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
We are really excited. I mean, we're excited, I think, every time we have a show.
Absolutely.
Especially when we get a show to actually go off on the right foot. This morning, not excluded. We're usually, excited just to be able to talk about recruiting and the things that are very helpful to the athletes, to the parents, to the coaches out there and whatnot. But, volleyball is one of those, what I consider a marquee sport. I mean, it's really become right up there with baseball and football and basketball. I mean, the camps, it seems like it's become a 365-day out of the year type of sport now, and it's gotten a lot of exposure. So, of course, with all of that comes the pressure, and all of a sudden the recruiting is heightened and the competition to get scholarships is heightened and things like that. And so we really do hope today's show will expose a lot of the myths, perhaps give some direction, to the parents and to the kids. That's the whole point of having the show. An extension of what we're trying to do anyway is to help the kids, help the parents, help the coaches, and help educate them on the process and what it takes to, go through the process correctly. I don't think any of us here will be able to guarantee anybody a scholarship, obviously.
Yeah, no.
But we can darn sure point you in the right direction so that you do everything right, and then it's up to the coaches. It's up to the skills. It's up to the grades, things like that. So before we get started, I want to talk real quick about a passion of mine, which is an organization that a gentleman named David Batter has started up in Michigan. It is a HERO Foundation. A HERO stands for Athletes Helping Everyone Reach Out Against Bullying. And, of course, we are flashing the colors. Dave, thanks for sending this to us. We will obviously be promoting a HERO any chance we get. The anti-bullying movement, if you will, has really taken on a life of its own. I mean,
absolutely.
it's and you hear a lot about the bullying, and it's not like it used to be when I was a kid. Someone smashed my lunch and everybody laughed and I was pissed off, and you moved on. Well, today it's bashing heads in. It's taunting to the point where kids are taking their own lives, and it's just become an epidemic. And I think that a lot of people talk about it, but not too many people want to really put their foot forward for fear of upsetting the apple cart, which in my opinion, how in the world could you possibly push the wrong button by trying to help and expose it and maybe lend a hand to the kids and the families who might need help. My message, me personally, is think about what you're doing. To the bullies out there who think you're cool and you love making yourself look good by intimidating those that might not be just like you, think about what you're doing. Is it worth the effort? Be a bigger person. Okay, if this kid isn't in your clique or in what an area that you are exposed to. Maybe he's not on the football team, or maybe he's not into skateboarding or she, or whatever the case may be. The fact is, just ignore him then. There's no rule that says you have to interact with him, but by God, when you do interact with him, don't go out of your way to be so brutal and cruel. Now, I know there's, the fact is there is taunting and the banter and whatnot. That just goes without saying. I mean, Chuck bullies me all the time.
All the time.
So, but we get that. But not to the point that it's become. There's no sense in being brutal. God knows the world is a tough enough place as it is. Our peers and the kids that you're in school with and stuff, they're supposed to be your buddies. They're supposed to be people that you can rely on and they rely on you. take a bigger stance. And I could get on a soapbox and talk about this for hours. Obviously, we're not going to do that, but I just wanted to share that with you. And please, parents, talk to your kids. You may think they're angels at the house, and maybe they're kicking the crap out of some kid every single day and making their lives miserable. Well, talk about it. Talk to the other parents. Get involved and try to find out and set that example. That's probably the best advice that I can give, from where I'm at. So, anyway, David Batter up in Michigan, great job with the Hero Foundation, and we're here to back you and help any way that we can. So, all right, now let's get on to some hot stuff. We promised you some great information regarding volleyball. To give you a little background, actually, I'll let John give a little background. Now, I know that you've coached at Episcopal. You were the head coach of a very successful program. Tell us a little bit about, what you've done and where you're at now.
Well, actually, volleyball wasn't my first sport. Back in high school, I played basketball, and I have something in common with Michael Jordan. I was cut my freshman year of basketball. Obviously, we've taken two completely different paths, but because I didn't make the basketball team, I ended up working with the volleyball team during class, started playing in there, got the volleyball coach at the time.
Nice.
Saw me and was like, hey, do you want to manage the volleyball team? So we ended up doing stuff with that. Actually ended up getting some skill work in, learned that I could actually play the sport. So ended up through working with them, that turned into officiating, which turned into club coaching, which I was an assistant for a few years. One of the coaches in the club brought me over to Nice High School, where I was a JV coach for 2 years. My first year didn't win a single game, which almost completely shut me off from the sport.
Changed your career path tremendously. Yes, I see that.
Stuck it out, and then from Nice, I went to Stanton as a JV coach, assistant on the varsity team.
Okay.
And then when I graduated from college, ended up going my first job at Episcopal. I was the JV coach for 1 year, went 22-4, and everyone's like, "Whoa, this guy might know what he's doing." So became the head coach the following year for the varsity team, and a lot of it has to do with the players.
Sure.
But had a great run as a program director. I think we made the playoffs every year except for one. We were upset 1 year by Fernandina Beach. But as we went through, just built the program up. I stepped down last year so I could go back to school and work on my master's degree. But I stayed on as an assistant, co-head coach. Went down to the Final Four, and kind of that's where we are right now.
Outstanding. Good. Outstanding. And it's a nice example to show that, if at first you don't succeed, I mean, it's real easy. I wasn't successful, so I guess I'm not cut out. You persevered. You went forward. You kind of followed the passion aspect, and good things happen,
right.
Which is a great message for the kids out there. That you think, I can't be a superstar right now, so to heck with it. Well, it applies to coaches, players, everybody. Guess what? Keep at it if you like it. Tackle the areas that you are good at, and good things happen.
Absolutely.
So that's outstanding, John. Thanks for sharing that with us, because that, again, a little side message to those out there. Now, it's funny, and you talked about managing the team, and I was and as you were saying that, I was thinking, that's something that a lot of kids you don't hear a lot about. Now, in the collegiate level, you'll hear where the kid's interested in sport, but he can't really play. He's not at that level, but he loves it and he wants to coach, or maybe become a manager or involved in some sort of administrative capacity. And that's something for the kids out there in all sports to consider. You might be passionate about a particular sport. You may not be able to play, but there is a whole business side to sports. And it is a great alternative. I've seen kids that were great in sports and chose to go to the administrative or the business side of the sport instead of the playing side. So think outside the box. Think about sports in general, and think that, what are my alternatives beyond being the player? And I think you'll be quite surprised at some of the things that are out there that you'll be interested in. A lot of fun. Now, John, let me ask you. We talk about volleyball becoming more of a marquee sport. I mean, women's volleyball in the last 10 years, from what I've seen, has just absolutely exploded. I mean, what's your take on that? What has been the behind the scenes cause of such growth in this sport?
Well, I think sports in general, especially high school sports, is kind of secular, where a sport will take off, it'll have its run, and then it kind of fades down a little bit, and another sport pops up. And I think volleyball was that sport where it's kind of taken off in, like you said, the past 10 years, and it's really grown. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with current events as far as in the sports world. Misty May and Carrie Walsh on the beach had their huge run, 130-some straight wins, 3 gold medals in the Olympics. And I think girls see that. Well, obviously we don't have beach volleyball in high school, but it translates to the indoor game as well. So I think the girls see, they have something to kind of grab hold of and say, hey, I want to do that. So I think that has a lot to do with the popularity of the sport. I see it peaking a little bit right now. At my school, especially, I think softball is starting to
rear its head again.
Right. I think it's starting to come back up. Maybe that's with the controversy with the Olympics, cutting the sport or something like that.
Right.
But so I still think volleyball is one of those marquee sports for the girls. And but again, it's secular. I think we're starting to see a little plateau effect, but it's still highly, highly popular.
Now, let me ask you something. We talk about girls volleyball all the time, and women's volleyball, and you see the focus. You don't see guys volleyball at all until the Olympics, and even then, to me, it takes a back seat. I mean, I was watching Misty May and whatnot. I watched all their matches. I didn't see a single. I couldn't even. I can maybe mention or think of one male volleyball player, Arch Corelli or something, or whatever.
Correct.
Well, see, even then I can't even get it right. And so it really befuddles me. I mean, and it's a tough sport. Oh, yeah. I mean, I love to play it, but you watch these girls and these guys play. I mean, it's a whole nother level. It's a bloody battle. Why isn't there more at the high school level for the boys?
Well, I think some of it has to do with Title IX, and I know some of your previous shows you've kind of touched on this, where there has to be that equity, and to add boys volleyball, you've got to add another girls sport somewhere else, and trying to find the time, the money to support those programs is kind of tough. Bulls here locally had a boys volleyball program. They have no one to play. So they're having to go down. They're having to travel to Orlando, South Florida, where boys volleyball is huge down there. So you get into the travel side of it. That costs money, officials, running a team, food, transportation, housing while you're down there. So it just becomes too expensive with no other schools up here. I'm sure their hope was that other schools would jump aboard. And
right.
We were close to adding a team as well, because I was going to coach that team, because it's in the spring. So the other side of that is now you're competing for baseball, lacrosse, track, soccer, and you're just spreading the athletes out thin in smaller schools. So a lot of the boys volleyball teams that you see down in the South, you might see a few small schools, but it's typically bigger schools that have more athletes to choose from.
Understood. Well, and that makes sense. It's a shame. It seems like, if the sport isn't translated into the collegiate area, if there's not, they don't want to do it. But like you said, I mean, it does take money. It's a shame. I mean, it really is a shame, because for the guys that, and I get that a lot. We get a lot of emails and messages talking about, where can I find a good, boys program? Who are the marquee boys? You're going to have to look around, look at clubs and associations. Now, that leads me to another question. I know that around here in this area, there are clubs and associations now, but everything I see seems to be girls. They don't seem to be appealing to the boys that maybe can't play high school, but maybe they could play there. And yes, at the collegiate level, there are colleges that have teams, maybe not scholarships, but again, like rowing, as an example, maybe they still want to play at a hot level and try to make an Olympic team, so they want to go to a college. Perhaps their grades are good enough to get them a scholarship, or they just want to walk on. There doesn't seem to be a lot of choices for the boys that say, how do I go from here to the Olympics? What does one do as a guy?
Right. Well, in town locally, there are a few smaller clubs. There's one big club, Jacksonville Juniors Volleyball, that I used to coach in about 5-6 years ago. They've created a boys program.
Oh, they do now have a boys program. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you said it, where it's more geared towards the girls. There's 4, 5, 6 teams in each age division for the girls.
Right.
They're starting to get those with the boys now, and I think they have 2 teams of boys and great coaching. They go to these tournaments, and that's where they're going to get their exposure now because we don't have high school.
Sure. Gotcha.
So it's available to them. Unfortunately, it's not as well publicized as it is for the girls.
Well, so that's a good tip right off the bat. If you're a guy and you want to play volleyball, contact associations in your area. Try to talk to certain coaches. Maybe a local college. You could find out, where are programs that you can get involved. So if you do want to compete at a high level and you don't have high school as an option, there might be some options for you there. Sounds like there's probably going to be areas that maybe there aren't any options, and it's just one of those things. You're just going to have to move. Gee, that never happens.
Right.
A la football and other sports. That but anyway, it does seem like there are options out there for the fellas. So, okay, now as far as these players that want to come in and start playing, at the high school level. And now I'm talking about the women's, the girls' teams. They come in, you don't see a lot of junior programs unless you're playing club or association. So let's say you come out of a parochial feeder school or something like that. We'll use Episcopal as an example. So the kids come in, they've never seen volleyball. I mean, how does a kid that's coming in know, do I have to be 6 feet tall because you got to get up over the net? Or, how do you stimulate the young kids to start thinking volleyball as a viable option for a sport in high school?
Well, with the explosion of the sport, almost every one of our feeder schools, middle schools, even 4th and 5th grade schools have volleyball teams now.
Oh, wow.
Because that's kind of their ticket to getting kids involved in sports. It's a fairly easy sport to set up as far as equipment. There's not a lot that you have to get into. You don't have pads and things like that. So you're able to start that at a younger age. A lot of our kids that come into the school already have experience.
Okay.
I'll give an example. The other day, a girl came to me who's going to be a junior, and she's never played volleyball before, and she wants to play. And, I encouraged her, absolutely try out, but know that you've got 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders who have experience that you're lacking right now that you're going to be competing with. So it is one of those sports where you kind of have to pick up at an early age. Am I saying you can't, as a freshman, come in, never played before? Absolutely not.
Sure.
When you touched on the height thing, you can't teach height.
Right.
And height it's not the end-all, be-all requirement for volleyball. But, if you're 6'5" and you're clogging up the middle, a coach will work with you on that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having that, 375-pound lineman in football. You're going to find a spot for it.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Right.
Very good. Excellent. Well, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into some more nitty-gritty of the recruiting aspects. This is good information that we're trying to share, and if you feel that if you don't have time to watch the whole show or whatever the case may be, you can tune in to viewmysport.com, go to the homepage and click on the breakdown, and we record our shows on that page, so that way you can catch the show when it's convenient for you. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hi there, this is Roger Tillis
And Chuck Olesker from The Breakdown and ViewMySport.com.
Athletes Helping Everyone Reach Out Against Bullying was founded with the purpose of bringing awareness to and educating our youth about the lifelong effects of bullying and how they can prevent it.
Be a Hero Against Bullying is not about religion. It's not about politics. It's not about money. It's about compassion. It's about caring. It's about being a friend.
As an athlete, you carry a lot of influence among your peers. They admire and look up to you. A gesture as simple as inviting a target to sit down with you during lunch or walking into the next class can save lives. Student athletes are making their schools a safer place and saving lives just by being a friend.
Learn more about this anti-bullying campaign by visiting www.beaheroagainstbullying.org or visiting us on Facebook. Thank you.
All right, and we're back. Hey, thanks for tuning back into the Breakdown. Again, I'm Roger Tillis, your host, here with Chuck Olesker, the co-host and engineer. Special guest today, volleyball coach John Dwyer from Episcopal High School out of Jacksonville, Florida. If you missed the last segment, we've been getting into some of the particulars of volleyball at the high school level, the popularity, options for the boys, things like that. The fact that the sport has grown so much. And I tell you, it has grown phenomenally. And I think we're going to see, I know it seems like it's sort of leveling off a little bit now, but I think we're going to see some changes, hopefully for the better. But I think that growth is probably going to continue, and as it should. Right now, we're going to get into the ViewMySport.com Athlete of the Week. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you, Roger. I am pleased to announce that this week's ViewMySport.com Athlete of the Week is Mary Kate Marshall. She's an outside hitter, coincidentally, out of Coppell High School in Coppell, Texas, which is just outside Dallas. She's a class of 2014,
Great. Uses
ViewMySport.com, and we are pleased to have her as our Athlete of the Week. Congratulations, Mary Kate.
Mary Kate, congratulations. And I wanted to ask you, Chuck, I believe, we talked about height and things like that in volleyball. She's not just a setter. What is she, 6 feet?
She's 6 foot tall.
Wow. Excellent. Well, keep eating your spinach and improving. As Coach Dwyer has reminded us, you can't coach height. So keep on. Wear those tall shoes.
That's right.
If you want to see more on Mary Kate, you can go to our homepage at viewmysport.com, and you'll see the Athlete of the Week box there. Click on her picture, and you'll be able to see her whole profile, stats, her video, things of that nature. All right. Now, we want to get into some more information regarding, the volleyball, how it's, grown. And during the break, we talked a little bit about this, and I'd really like to see what your opinion is. We compared women's volleyball with football as far as how it's become now a year-round sport. It seems like there's really no longer a season. I mean, unless you coincide with the seasons, the fall, the spring, the summer, etc. What in the world is going on now with year-round volleyball?
Well, I think with the competition for scholarships in college is that, and I hate to use the word specialization because we want our athletes to play different sports as far as cross-training and things like that, but it's the competition levels become the point where you almost have to play year-round.
Court time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, the fall is when volleyball is played for the girls. It's also the same season for colleges. So they're not doing a whole lot of recruiting
right.
in the high school season. They'll send, a second or third assistant up to watch a tournament where they can look at multiple players at the same time.
Yeah, and let me stop you there because that's a good point. And I think that, with this sport as an example, and this would probably apply to others, like football, everybody thinks, well, there's, they've got an office full of these traveling recruiters and whatnot. Now, you probably have some clubs that do have those specialists, but a lot of teams, they can't afford it. They don't have the budget for so they do have to find those recruits in the off season.
Right.
And so that's a good point. So when you're playing at the high school level and you're thinking, gosh, nobody's coming to see me, well, gosh, they might not be going to see anybody right at that point. Unless they really have somebody that they can, fire out to go and visit and watch a game or so. So, sorry, go ahead. Right. I just wanted to make a point of that.
And when they do have that one or two athletes that may have contacted them or that they have special interest in, they're not going to go, per se, to a single match. They might go to the big rival match to watch and see how you perform under pressure.
Right.
Or like a district game or something like that. But because they're in season, they're going to want to maximize their time. So they're going to find a tournament that you're in where there's other big teams that they can
see
look
everybody.
at others, some of them who might be under the radar that may be a little awkward because they're 6'3" and they haven't really grown into their body yet.
Right.
That they can work with. So now they want to try to jump on that person as well. So during the high school season, you won't see too many coaches in the gym. It's really become, because club is in the spring now, which is the opposite of both the college and the high school seasons, you'll see them going to club tournaments. Now, if you go to a big qualifier for volleyball, you've got coaches everywhere.
Sure.
You've got notepads out, the 16s, 17s courts. even the 18 courts, even most of them have committed. There's some that are still haven't committed that you might find a diamond in the rough.
Right.
But those courts are covered with coaches, and not just second and third assistants. You've got the head coach watching you play at that point. So it's almost become to the point where the high school, and I hate to say this, I mean, I have colleges contact me about my players, but they want to know about their club, and I understand that because if you have let's say you've got a great outside hitter, but your setter is not up to par.
Sure.
The coach can't really see what that player can do because the ball's not getting to them.
Right.
Where when you put them on a club team, the setter's solid, the passing's solid. Now I can see what that player can do. So I don't want to say the high school has been phased out as far as that goes, but it's become more club oriented.
And that leads me to a next point that I wanted to make in a question. And we've seen this in other sports too, but volleyball, it really, and you hear this coming up, but it seems to be an issue that you've got the high school teams and talent suffering because and some players won't even play at the high school level. They'll only play club. So you see the talent pool, just as you mentioned, kind of dwindling a bit. But it hurts the high school program. I mean, you've got the kids that maybe want to play for the school, for the good of the school. I mean, and that's what high school and collegiate sports were all supposed to be about. School representation. Now it's about the money, the scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. We get that, but I mean, is that a good thing? I mean, here you see the high school suffering. You see the kids trying to, as you said, specialize by playing in the club and associations, and you've already just made the point. You've got the talent of the setter, as an example. You can pretty much know that they're going to be solid at the club level, where you don't know what you're getting at the high school level. Is that fair? I mean, what's the buzz as far as that goes? I mean, from a high school point of view.
Well, if you look at, and I know this is kind of an national, a lot of people are watching this, but as far as our local area, you've got your pocket of good teams, whether it be the Bulls, Episcopal, Bishop Kenny, Ponte Vedra, teams like that, where they're going to be solid. Those kids are going to play. But you get into some of the smaller schools where I'll use Paxton and Stanton as an example. Where Paxton, I know a girl, their best player didn't play because she didn't want to deal with that, where I don't have a ball getting to me to hit, so I'm just gonna work out and get ready for club season. So it hurts a little bit because you got that downtime where she could really help that team. You see a lot in soccer where their club season coincides with the high school season, and we've had a number of times where our best players aren't available for a game because they're off at a club tournament. And it's like wake up, soccer.
Yeah.
Move it somewhere else because you're killing the high school program.
Right.
But, so I am happy the fact that volleyball is separate spring and fall for that reason. But at the same time, if a player knows that, my setter, my passing is going to be horrible, I'm not going to be able to get the stats that I need. And it becomes almost selfish at that point. I'm not going to play. I'm going to wait till club season.
Well, let me ask. You mentioned about girls who would just play club. Do college coaches, when they're evaluating girls, I mean, is that a hindrance that they only play club? I mean, are they looking at someone who, does that say a lot about their personality or their commitment to a team if they're not playing for high school?
Great question.
And only playing for club?
Right. I think that might factor into it. The coach may say, hey, why don't you play for your high school team? And then the coach may gauge their response on whether or not they want that athlete.
I happen to know for a fact, in talking to several college coaches, when we talk about what their criteria is, their list of checkpoints, and some of the coaches, they'd rather see them with that passion for the high school team representing, and they do see that as a negative. Now, not all coaches are like that. Some, as we know, there's some coaches out there, it's all about the win. It's all about the skill. It's all about, whatever they can get for their team to win and market. But there are some out there that they judge the character of the player. Now, I'm not saying that, every kid that only wants to play, I mean, everybody's got their own strategy. And you've said, I mean, if that's where the coaches are going to be and they need the stats, then I mean, it's a strategy,
Right.
especially if that's the only way they can go to college. And so they're going to treat it as a business.
Right. Well, and on the flip side of that, I've had seasons where, my passing hasn't been as great or my setting hasn't been as great. And, my hitters will come to me. I know we're kind of focusing on the hitters, but let's say my setter comes to me and says, I'm not getting the ball to where I need it to set. And, college coaches are coming to look at me. And I sit them down. A college coach, a good college coach, can look at what you're doing to see whether or not they want you. They're not looking at the results. They're looking at, is she in the right position? Does she have good form? Is she mobile, lateral, moving around? So, I have to remind them that, if you are playing on a team that's not up to your capability, a college coach who's good is going to know, okay, she's got good movement, she's got good lateral, I can work with that.
Sure.
They understand the ball's not getting to where it needs to be for you. So there is a flip side to it that, sometimes isn't relayed to those high school players saying, just play.
Right. Well, and I could see that. I mean, okay, instead of them, getting, I don't know, however many touches or spikes or whatever, but they did it a few times. Well, I can see if they've mechanically, if I can see those mechanics work a couple of times, well, then I know that if I'm going to feed that ball to them more, they're probably going to deliver the same result.
Right.
They don't need to have to see it
Right.
again and again and again and again. So
they're going to
that's a good point.
they're going to focus on the arm swing, the approach, are they getting on and off the net properly? That's what they're looking at. They're not really looking at the results as much.
Gotcha. Excellent. Now, let me ask you this, though. Because of the popularity, and so many girls are playing, good grief, I can't go to the corner Starbucks on a Saturday morning without having to wait in line behind several teams. Maybe that's why they're so good. They're all beefed up on caffeine. But I mean, gosh, it just seems like – and these are all – you could tell that there's a tournament at the high school down the street. And but with the popularity and with there being so many candidates, and we've heard this with other sports, I mean, that obviously is making it more difficult for the recruit trying to get the scholarship. I mean, you've got hundreds of thousands of girls playing, but you only have maybe 50,000 to 60,000 scholarships. I don't know what the exact number is, but, there's that ratio. I mean, what are the girls doing to try to separate themselves? And on the flip side of that, what are the college coaches looking at, from what you understand, as far as, how am I going to separate? What are the intangibles? What are the things? Am I looking at, strictly grades, strictly community service? I mean, when they're all really, really good, how are you separating them?
Right. Well, I do believe that the grades kind of do come first, and a lot of people are like, that's kind of weird. Why are you saying the grades come first? If you have two athletes that are kind of similar in ability, and you've got one with a 3.8 and one with a 2 point something, I don't have to spend as much money on the 3.8. And even if they're maybe a small step behind skill-wise, I don't have to spend as much money. I can develop that player, whereas I'm going to have to use an entire scholarship on the 2.8.
Maybe get two players with one scholarship, with partials. And when we talk about that all the time, that, scholarship doesn't always mean full ride.
Right. So, and they do some stacking where they're going to try to get as much free money academically first.
Sure.
And then supplement it with what they have athletically. So, the grades do pull.
Well, and especially for Division III, NAIA, boy, that you can get your full ride all over the place. NAIA, if you're looking at a smaller school program, because of the grades, that's where the bulk of their money comes from for their scholarships. And of course, Division III, that's where virtually all the money. Now, again, as an athlete, a parent, do we care which pot the money comes from, as long as it's not their personal bank account?
Exactly.
If someone else is footing the bill, hey, no problem. Well, I tell you what, let's take a good break now, or it's a good time to take a break right now. Because I want to get into that a little bit more. Now we're starting to get into the particulars that really do affect, the athlete and the parents and whatnot. We're going to get into some recruiting specific things. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Please tune in, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Are you a high school athlete, parent of a high school athlete, maybe a high school coach or a college coach looking for a high school athlete, or just a fan of high school and college sports? Then you need the ViewRecruit mobile recruiting app. It's got everything. Athletes can create profiles, including their highlight videos. They can use the Recruit Network to send their profiles directly to college coaches. If a coach likes your profile, great. You get a notice directly on your mobile device and receive an email to boot. College coaches can receive updates directly on their devices and use the search function to find the talent that fits their program. Whether you're an athlete or a college coach, it's like having your very own recruiting department right at your fingertips. Download the ViewRecruit app now on iTunes for your iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch. Be part of the #1 high school athletics and college coaching network. Get it today, the ViewRecruit mobile recruiting app. All right, and we're back. Thanks for tuning in here on The Breakdown. I'm Roger Tillis, your co-host, here with Chuck Olesker, and, of course, our special guest, Coach John Dwyer of the Episcopal High School volleyball team. During the break, we got into a little conversation, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit with Coach Dwyer. We talked about a couple of players, and one of the players who got a scholarship from his past team that went on to school, did okay, did pretty well as a player, but was even better as a person. And John, tell that story if you don't mind.
Well, when she was highly recruited from a lot of Division III schools, and then a Division II school stepped up and said, hey, and it was from going down to their camp every summer, and they really wanted her, so we brought her down there, and I work their camp every single year. We take our team down there, and we were talking, and I noticed that she wasn't getting as much playing time her junior and senior year, and she never, she was frustrated that she wasn't playing, but she never showed it. She was a great teammate. So I talked to the college coach about it, and I asked him, I was like, so did we kind of miss on that one? He goes, we may have missed on the player, but we didn't miss on the person, because she's a great teammate. She supports one, and that's huge. I've had some college coaches, when we talk about what are you looking for, and one of the first things I do is I see how they interact with their parents. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, how they treat their parents is typically how they're going to treat their teammates and us.
Oh, yeah.
He goes, so if they're, a horse's patoot to their parents, I don't want them.
It's a respect factor.
Absolutely.
And I want to kind of freeze that for a second, because that's a very good point. And we talk about, personality. And we talk about, a lot of the players that have the swagger and the cockiness. Let me make something perfectly clear. Coaches don't like cocky, certain swagger. They like confidence. And I'm here to tell you there is a big, big difference between being confident and being cocky. Confidence comes from within. Confidence shows in your interaction, helping your teammate. Remember, it's a team. It's a team. This isn't the MMA. I mean, this, especially in volleyball, what do they say? You're only as good as your weakest player on the court, And so I hear this more and more from college coaches where they talk about they want to know what the person is like off the court, out of school. What do they do in the community? Things like that. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that's a really good point. So if you feel that, you're on top of your game and you're the man or the woman in this case, you better look in the mirror and make sure that you're not coming off poorly, that you are being respectful of others, respectful of your parents. When you communicate with a coach, leave the slang at home, use correct grammar. When you send them messages and things like that, obviously use correct grammar. And say thank you and things like that. Those little things that they're looking for can make a big, big difference. So
and with our sport in volleyball, you're so dependent on your teammates. It's not like basketball where, if you got one guy who can
light
tear
it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Get out of his way. You need someone to pass the ball to the setter. You need somebody to set the ball to the hitter, and the hitter needs to hit the ball. Until they change the rules where you can set yourself and pass to yourself, it's not going to change. How you react to your teammate's mistake is just as important as how you react to your own mistake. So if you're getting down on your teammate, college coach is going to see that.
Oh, yeah.
I've had some great...
And it's obvious, too. I mean, it's right out in the open.
I've had some great players where they wanted to know why they weren't recruited. I asked the coach, why? Because she's not a good teammate.
Attitude.
Exactly.
And that's something that, I go to these tournaments and games and stuff, and I tell you, one of my favorite high school sports to watch is girls volleyball. I mean, and a lot of it is because of that teamwork that you see out on the court. I mean, one bad play, they're rallied together, they're fired up, and there isn't the, eyeball rolling and kicking. Everybody gets frustrated. I mean, there's always going to be an issue. But it is amazing how much camaraderie there is. And I love it. And it's contagious.
And you'll see the eyeball rolling on the court, but that's typically the team that's losing because they're not supporting one another. So.
Nice. I like that. Well, excellent point. I'm glad that we were able to hit on that because there are those things that are kind of behind the scenes that, nobody talks about. Now, I can assure you with ViewMySport.com, shameless plug, again, we can do it because it's our show.
Yep.
But the fact is, these little intangible things that you don't think about and that other companies don't really get into because, it's about the money and it's about exposure. Well, I'm here to tell you those little things make a difference. They darn sure make a difference. So please, parents, athletes, pay attention. Pay attention to what the coaches are saying. Pay attention to the information that we're sharing. That one little speck of information might make the difference between going to school on your dime or going to school on the college's dime. Not to mention that you get to play your sport at the collegiate level. So anyway, write that down. Now, we had talked in the past, we mentioned a little bit about the height aspect. And I think it's a bit of a myth that you have to be tall. It's like you have to be tall to play basketball. Well, you have to be tall to play volleyball. Obviously, if you're tall, like you said, you're plug in the middle. You're intimidating at the net. But for those people out there that are thinking, well, I wonder if I could play volleyball, going into high school. What are some of the other physical attributes that you're looking for, size-wise and skill-wise?
Well, obviously, any play at the net, you prefer something that's a little bit taller, someone who's a little bit more
and with really big hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But college coaches, they're going to look at your reach. They're going to look at your approach jump, which is doing your 3-4 step approach to Vertimax to see how high you're getting above the net. Your block jump, your standing jump, just to see where you are. But there's other positions on the court where almost lend themselves to someone who's not as tall. The libero, for example, who's the defensive specialist, or someone who comes in back row.
I'm glad you said libero because I always wondered, was I pronouncing it correctly? Libero.
I think technically it's libero, but
oh god, there we go. Another
tomato.
I gotta remember. Yeah. Okay.
So, but they're and you'll see 6-foot liberos in college because they're just so athletic and talented. But that position almost lends yourself to somebody who's lower to the ground because they have the timing to get underneath the ball a little bit more. The way the coach runs their system. Do you run a 5-1 where you have one setter going all the way around? Well, when that setter comes front row, you're going to want somebody a little bit taller.
Makes sense.
So if they're running a 6-2 where the setter is always coming from the back row, that eliminates the height because you can't block when you're running from the back row. So you can get away. Like this year, I'm going to have a smaller setter, and we're having to decide, are we going to run a 5-1? What are we going to do with her when she gets in the front row? Do we run a 6-2? Now she's in her flow. She can come in, do her job, come back out. So, and they have a 4-2 where the setter is always in the front row. Well, you better have two tall, or someone who's able to block, has a good vertical.
Right.
A lot of times you'll see undersized middles in high school. They're middles because they can get away with it against the competition. They might be 5'9", 5'10", 5'11". That in college, you're going against a 6'5" middle. It's not going to work. So the coach ends up transitioning them to the outside.
Gotcha.
So I guess another tip or whatever would be to be open to that change.
Be flexible.
If you are set, I'm a middle blocker. I can't use you. I'm looking for an outside. I know you play middle, but I could probably use you on the outside or the right side. You'll see setters who translate into a good libero and vice versa. So if you're trying to pigeonhole yourself into one specific position, setters, you can kind of do that a little bit. But if you're open-minded to play back row, you might be recruited to set your junior and senior year, but you're going to play libero your freshman and sophomore year.
Gotcha.
Because you have somebody ahead of you that's what their main job is.
Sure.
And then you can learn from them and, think players get hurt.
Right.
So you may be the backup setter / starting libero.
Well, and that's a good point. Not everybody can start. Not everybody is going to, and the fact is when you leave high school and those years after high school, ton of change. I mean, you're going to develop strength, size, speed. I mean, your whole skill set changes, so you better be flexible. I mean, how many times, take football, for example, you see, the quarterbacks become defensive backs or wide receivers or linebackers. God, we've seen a quarterback in their freshman and sophomore year turn into a linebacker and put on 100 pounds. I mean, it's just amazing, the difference. And then go on and be drafted as a linebacker in the NFL. I mean, so yeah, you better have the flexibility, built in, because it's only going to benefit you. And it shows your versatility. So, again, more value added as a recruit.
And the coach looks at it, how badly do you want to play?
Bingo.
How passionate are you about this sport? Are you
Sure.
willing to make this sacrifice for the betterment of the team?
Right.
Which shows if you're a good teammate or not.
Right. Don't be a prima donna.
Yeah.
Now, as far as and thinking back, in our discussion as far as size and things like that, typically when the college coaches do come around, I mean, are they? And I know every program is probably a little different, but is there that normal pattern? Oh well, I'm looking for XYZ. This is kind of the mold that I'm trying to fill. I mean, what typically do you hear from the college coaches?
The college coaches know their roster inside and out as far as who's graduating when, what positions are graduating, and what they're looking for. I need a setter for 2015. So they'll go down to, what would that be, like the juniors or the sophomores,
Sure.
that age group, and watch that particular position. So a good thing to do, I've had players go on to college websites and look at their position that's graduating. And look, this is a college that I'm looking at, I'm interested in. They need an outside hitter that year.
That's and I'll stop you here just for a second. That's a great tip. For those out there, when you're researching school, there's a couple reasons why you want to research the school, obviously from the scholastic side and the social side. You want to see, is this a good fit? But also from that sport, like Coach Dwyer just said, go and look at what their roster is now. See how many seniors they have. I mean, if you go on and look at a roster and maybe they're sophomore and junior heavy, and they're not losing a lot of people, they may only have a couple of slots, whereas another team, they might be losing a whole rotation. And there might be opportunities. So when you're putting together your collegiate list of who you want to court, if you will, for a scholarship, that'll help you prioritize, who has the need. And again, at viewmysport.com, we have the college directory. We have the college coach directory. Great tools to help you go in and get immediately to those athletics pages for that school and check their rosters out. But that's a great
Absolutely.
tip. And because a lot of parents on the kids, they're just lost in this giant, whirlpool of college lists and whatnot. We help you sort it out. So great point, Coach. As far as skills go, I mean, if you've got, the high school players that are going, Coach Dwyer, I really want to play at the collegiate level. There's just so much to focus on. I mean, what are the fundamental areas that I should really try to be good at? I mean, like football, it's, speed. Speed, if you can be really fast, it'll open some doors for you. I mean, in the sport of volleyball, what are those areas that the kids, as they're growing up, can focus on to get better in? And things that they can work on maybe on their own.
I mean, that's simple. Ball control. If you can pass, and I tell this every camp that I run, work at, if you can pass, you're going to find your way on the court some way, somehow. Because the ball control that's the first thing that happens in the point. After the ball is served, that ball has to be passed to the setter. Now, you've got some coaches in college who are very particular in technique. Your right foot has to be forward, your knees in front of your toes, shoulders in front of your knees, platform has to be solid and all that. That's what they're looking for. You've got some coaches who say, I don't care if you pass standing on your head as long as the ball goes to the setter.
Well, it's the result.
Yeah.
It's the result that you're looking for.
So there's some that are result driven. There's some that are technique driven, knowing that they can work with that. So again, as you're going through the process, you have to kind of feel out that coach what they're looking for. But ball control is huge. Same thing with setting. If you're good with your hands, regardless of what position, let's say that it's a bad pass and the setter can't get to the ball. If you can step in and deliver a ball to the opposite hitter from you, it's huge. So I would say ball control is probably the number one thing. If you can do that, you're going to be highly sought after.
Okay, and I assume that the players out there, they could get with their coaches and find out the specific drills and things that they can work.
Absolutely.
It's funny. I'll go by some of the we have outdoor volleyball courts not far from here at the studios, and I'll go by and I'll sometimes see kids out there, and they're just firing the ball up in the air, and just walking around on their own, just doing nothing but that. And so I'm sure that these are probably kids that are thinking, okay, this is a good drill. I mean, are there any specific drill that you would recommend if you like with lacrosse? You hear wall ball, bam, off the wall. Just again, that ball control. Volleyball, is there a specific tip out there that you would?
And you'll see a lot of players do drills against the wall as much as possible. And I know it's hard with our sport because of the way it's set up. And with basketball, you can go out to find any court, and you've got it available to you. Anytime you can do game-specific drills, whether it be have someone throwing you the ball and you passing to a target, making you move, getting in position, and anything that is game-related as possible without playing the game, is good. I think beach volleyball is a great cross-trainer for indoor volleyball, because you have to have control in beach volleyball.
So all you kids in Kansas, just tell mom and dad that you got to spend the summer at the coast somewhere. So. No, actually, and just to kind of expand on that, beach volleyball doesn't necessarily mean you need to be at the beach. Find a sand pit, and keep the sand clean. Rake the sand, because there's a lot of cats out there, man. Yeah. I've found a few chocolate surprises in the outdoor courts that we played on. So, but yeah, I mean, find the sand, find the setup, and I would think that as a game, because of the conditions, because of the sand, it's kind of like when you sprint up, sand dunes and things like that. It's strengthening the legs. It's giving you some of the physical attributes that would transfer very well, I would think, to the the hardcore game.
Right, and like basketball, where you can go out and play 1-on-1, you can play volleyball with 4 people 2-on-2. And as you're playing 2-on-2, the ball control gets better because it's just you and that person.
And the choice. Yeah.
Now you play 3-on-3, you got 4-on-4, and it'll translate to 6-on-6 when you get into it. So as much as you can, game-related things is going to be important.
Gotcha. Now, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here. And, we talked about club and association. And, we know the importance. We understand where it fits in the scheme of things as far as going to college and whatnot. Now, for the kids that may not be able to afford association or club ball in the off season, are they destined to be doomed as far as scholarships go? Or you can play only high school ball and still shine enough to be considered a recruit for a collegiate team.
I think you can, and that's where the being proactive on your part, getting your name out there, is going to be important, and that's where the importance of the high school coach will come in. If you know they're not going to play club, they can't play club, whether it be financially or if they play another sport that they really love too. There's ways to do it, so you have to be a little bit more proactive if you're not doing the club circuit.
Love that word, proactive. We push that all the time, early and often. And of course, ViewMySport.com gives those tools out to the athletes to set up their profiles, to connect and network with the coaches at any point in time. So doing it yourself and doing it early on instead of waiting for it to come to you, that kind of levels the playing field. So okay, great. Well, and that's what we wanted to know. Now I'm going to kind of flip things over a little bit as far as the club and association. We're going to get into the dark side, and this is something that I've had experience in. Wasn't real thrilled as far as that goes. But I tell you what, we're going to take a break, When we come back, we're going to get into that because I think this is an area that the parents especially need to be aware of. Some of these club and travel, hell, I'm going to call them what they are, scams. They're money makers, and we're going to break that down for you a little bit here when we come back. So stay tuned. There are thousands of high school athletes that want to play at the college level. They just don't get noticed. At ViewMySport.com, we get your game out of the shadows and into the college spotlight. It's fast, easy, best of all, it's free. In the time you can text your friends, you can create and send your own athlete profile to as many colleges as you want. Get to the next level. Visit ViewMySport.com today and follow the 3 simple steps. Why wait? Your competition's not. All right, welcome back to the Breakdown. I'm Roger Tillis, your host, here with Chuck Olesker, our illustrious co-host and engineer. Special guest, Coach John Dwyer from Episcopal High School, volleyball coach, basketball coach, has been very successful in the volleyball area, and we're very happy to have him here, sharing his wisdom and helping share some information that'll help you as the athlete and you as the parent, and perhaps other high school coaches out there. Before the break, we were getting into some great information regarding, from a recruiting standpoint, some myths and things like that, putting to rest. Before the break, we also said that we were going to get into, I guess we could call it the darker side of not just recruiting, but the darker side of volleyball in general. And it's a bit of an epidemic that I've seen, not just in volleyball, but in sports in general. I'm just going to call a spade a spade. The fact is, there are people, organizations out there that are all about making money off of youth sports. Now, I have no problem with somebody offering a great service or giving, something of substance that will help the kids or their parents. But the fact is, there are some that don't put the athlete and their well-being or their betterment first. They put making the dollar first. And we are all about being against that and trying to make the parents aware. So parents, pay attention. If you didn't really pay attention to any other segment of this show, you better pay attention here. And what I'm referring to for our first example is the organizations and individuals that are out there that will approach you as the parent or your child and in the off season, especially during the summer, you see a lot of this. Travel teams. Now, before I get into this, understand I'm not saying every travel team. I'm not saying every organization. I'm not saying every association or club. But there are a whole lot of them out there that take this approach. And the approach is that they will say to your child or say to you as the parent, your child is a phenomenal player in volleyball. Phenomenal. We have chosen them to be on our travel team, our national team, our competition oriented team, our tournament team, whatever they're going to call it, our elite. Oh God, you hear the word elite used to describe all these special teams, and by God, we are proud to have you. Now, for a sum of $2,000, we will be more than happy to get her signed up, and we'll give you the schedule and our curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. Oops, wait a minute, back up, $2,000, and that's probably on the cheap side. Mm-hmm. I happen to know personally a friend of mine whose daughter was a very good volleyball player. The mother contacted me and said this was the situation. I'm using their situation as the example, where they were all about having her on the team because of her skill and her leadership and everything else that they listed out for. She couldn't afford the $2,000. By the way, that was the first payment. Another $2,000 was going to be due like in a month. The fact is, they couldn't afford it. All of a sudden, well, okay, later, they're on to the next elite athlete that they can bring onto the team that has been chosen because of their leadership and their skill set, et cetera, et cetera. And it comes down to they are about the money. Not the fact that that kid's got skill. They know there's a bunch of kids out there that have skill. They want to load a roster with parents who have a loaded checkbook. And that's what it comes down to. The money, the money, the money. And it's sickening, absolutely sickening. So parents, beware. And beware of the pitch that some of these people will give you. where they get into, well, this is the way to be tracked by college coaches. We're not only going to have you playing on this travel team, but we're going to evaluate you, and we're going to make sure this information is available to coaches. Well, as Coach Dwyer has already stated, yes, court time is important. Get court time without paying thousands of dollars for it. I think it's criminal. I think those people actually should be, I think things need to be maintained. It's fraud. Call it what it is. It's like these combines that are out there and these certain camps out there that lead you to believe that that's the only way to get discovered by coaches. We could talk all about that, but the fact is, in volleyball, I see example after example, and you also see it in softball. A lot of these types of setups. So parents, be very careful. Be leery of the people that want your kid on the team for the thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars, whatever the case may be. If you're not quite sure, pin them down and ask them. Say, well, wait a minute. I thought you're choosing my child to be on your team because of their skill set and leadership. I mean, John, am I off on this? I mean, what's your opinion in that respect as far as this pay-to-play crap is what I'm going to call it, because that's what it is. I mean, what's your take on this?
And there's a range of it. It goes from working with a coach one-on-one, who's, I don't want to say volunteering their time because you're paying them.
Sure.
But they're approaching you, hey, come work with me. I'll get you to the next level, to clubs and associations, summer travel teams, and things like that. I'll start with some of the individual coaches who come out. I've had conversations with them where, they charge $100, $150 an hour. And, I'm like, wow. I was like, I think a coach should be paid for their time. Don't get me wrong. You're out there, you're doing a service. You should be paid.
Certainly.
And I've had where I've opened the gym up and, $25, come in, I'll work with you, whatever. And I'm like, wow, how do you get $150? Excuse me. And they say the more you charge, the more they think you're worth. And then more people come to you. And it was like, go ahead and start charging more. He goes, eventually you'll see some people not come.
Trainer of the stars,
But somebody will, and then someone else will, and they're like, wow, well, he must be really good, or she must be really good because they're charging $150, $200 an hour.
It's a psychology job.
Right. So you got to kind of be leery of that. Clubs and associations, they do they provide the service of getting that on-time court time and things like that. I was a club coach. There are clubs out there that do it the right way.
I think so, too. I think there
absolutely.
are some phenomenal organizations out there.
There are clubs that will charge you just enough for entry fees, travel, uniforms, paying the coaches. Sure.
Yeah, and let me interrupt just for a second, just so everybody understands. I'm not trying to be unreasonable when it comes to this. I grew up, played Little League baseball and football, and yes, you had the registration fee. The money's got to come from somewhere, gas costs, travel costs. We understand that. There are the standard, but if that's the case, make that the case. Don't mislead just to get the bucks. So,
right.
And we understand there are legitimate setups for that. So please continue.
Right. So, but if you look at the makeup of, some larger clubs, there are a lot of assistant coaches or coaches that are trying to get into college. There's a limited amount of head coaching positions in college sports, and that's where the money is, the head coach.
Right.
The assistant coaches aren't making anything. You can't live off an assistant coach's salary. So to supplement
let me cross that off my bucket list.
That's right. Yeah.
So to supplement that, you get into the clubs things, and they have to pay those coaches. And if they really want them, and they're good coaches,
sure,
but they need something year round. So now they end up starting to work in the club, doing individual lessons, running leagues and tournaments and things like that, and they have to be paid. So you get that where they're
money's got to come from somewhere.
Right. So you got to kind of be leery of that. There's some associations, there's some big ones out in the Midwest where they guarantee you come here, you make it through 4 years, you're going to get a college scholarship. Well, by your junior year, if they don't think you can do it, you're cut.
Yeah.
So they make good on their promise.
Sure.
But they're going to get rid of you the first sign that you can't cut it. And then, there's some summer things where, hey, let's travel to Europe and play. Gosh, we really want you to come play with us. You got, like you said, okay, I've had on a 12-girl roster, I've had my number 10 girl be recruited to go on one of these trips. Well, every 10 kids that go on the trip, that coach gets one member of their family for free.
Oh, sure.
Or themselves for free.
Yeah.
So
that's a way to pay for your vacation.
That's
right. So there's a reason why you can afford it.
Right.
And I just laughed because knowing that she barely comes off the bench for me, and now you want her on an elite team.
Well, they feed the ego,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents love to be able to talk about their kids getting on these elite teams.
Hey, we're going to Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. Yet she can't get off the bench and play for the high school team. Amazing. Amazing. Well, and again, we're not lumping everybody into the same. I mean, I know from personal experience. I mean, I know there are good coaches at good associations. There are good club travel programs. But unfortunately, there are more that are not legit in that respect. And we'll pivot into camps.
Mm-hmm.
And camps, I don't care what the sport is. Camps are fun. Camps are great to go and see, your peers and compete in skills and things like that. Camps are not a way to get discovered. You might perhaps get discovered if you're so good that you stick out of that 800, person roster that's also attending that camp. If the one or two college coaches that may or may not be there happen to see you, but the fact is you're not going to go there and get evaluated and discovered and put on, a special list. It doesn't happen. The camps will tell you this. They'll mark it that way. But the truth be told, that's not the case. Now, our tip, and we talked about this during the break, if you're going to go to a camp, and if it's a college camp, I'm not talking about tournaments. I'm talking about camps where you learn skills and whatnot. Going to the collegiate camps are a fantastic idea, but don't think because it's a college camp you're going to automatically be, in front of all the coaches and get evaluated. You need to contact that coaching staff prior to you going. I don't mean the day before. I'm talking to like several weeks to a month before, and let them know, Coach, I will be at this camp at this period of time. I would love to be able to set some time aside so I can introduce myself to you and maybe get a 5 or 10 minute evaluation to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing so I can be considered as a legitimate recruit for your program. Do it up front and try to get that set aside. Otherwise, you're not going to get that time. Myth, or am I on the right track, Coach?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Again, it goes back to the assistant coaches at the colleges aren't making a lot of money, so they got to supplement their pay to keep them because they're good coaches.
Right. Sure.
So the camps are money makers for the assistant coaches. They run it, they get through. That's how they make their money to kind of survive. The camps are good. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Team camps are good. Individual skill camps are good.
They're fun. They're certainly fun.
Right. So you get, let's say you're going to a setter-specific camp. You're on a court with 50 setters. Well, how many touches are you really getting?
Right.
I mean, you're running through, and they're trying to get as many touches as possible, but when you're on a court with 50 kids, you're not getting a lot of touches in. So you want to kind of pick and choose where you're going to go. I've had players, got so excited. Division I school brought me, look, they want me to come to their camp. Well, it's a form letter.
Yeah. You're on a marketing list.
That's right.
You're one of 1,000 that were invited. They want you to come.
So that happens in volleyball too, where you probably see this where the kid or the parents talk about, the letters they're getting, and they get excited and they post the pictures of them on Facebook and things like that.
And then I have to be the bad guy that steps in and says, sweetheart, everybody got that letter.
Yeah, don't stop your recruiting initiatives. Keep going because that's just, I kind of had a little experience with that when my son was in, I think, 6th or 7th grade, and he started getting letters from Duke. And I'm like, wait, A, he doesn't even play sports, and B, he somehow, they get him early, and they just figure it's a sales initiative is what it is.
Right.
So, well, as far as the camps go and things like that, I mean, you do whatever you feel is necessary to get the exposure. You do what you feel is necessary. You work hard, but you got to be smart. You want to work smart too. And these camps, you don't need to go to every camp. What if you don't go to a camp? What if you don't, attend these special? It's okay. You don't have to feel like you're behind. I can't tell you how many people go to these camps because they want to get better. Well, so you might go to one of these camps, they're not filled with all these people full of just phenomenal skill. I mean, so you have to look at this from all the different directions. Don't feel like you're being slighted because you're not at a camp, or that you're on some, blacklisted because you didn't go to a camp. It is not essential. You do not have to go. You do not have to compete on an elite team. As coaches said, it's court time. And you find court time any way you can. And you make sure that, once you have a schedule, you let the coaches know. I think and we talked about this, you already talked, Coach Dwyer, about, being proactive. Whether you're a blue chipper, whether you think you're the superstar, or whether you're just starting out as a freshman or a 7th or 8th grader, you get your profile made, you get your information put together and up to date, and you start connecting with these coaches. You start introducing yourself. You don't have to be a superstar to show them what a great person you are or how active you are in the community. And we're going to wrap things up on a great note, and I want to talk about this. And we always make a big deal out of community service. Like grades can open up more doors for scholarship for the athletes than just being an athlete. Well, one of the big things that the coaches look at, obviously you said, what kind of person are you? Mm-hmm. Not just on the court or in the sport, but outside. And community service is an outstanding opportunity, not just to fit the bill for a requirement that the school requires, but a way for you to go out and experience a little bit of real life. Make connections with those out in business and whatnot. But I know that you, Coach Dwyer, have implemented not so much community service, but a community awareness. I've been to your pink games, and you see this real popular now in a lot of sports where pink, but you really, back before it became the thing to do, you guys were doing stuff like that. And I actually had the privilege of going to one of your events where you guys pinked out, and it was great. I mean, talk about a little bit of that as far as the community aspect and helping in that direction.
Right, and in college athletics, that's just a small portion of the college experience. When a college is looking at you, they're looking at what do you bring the college, not specifically just the sport. Mm-hmm. So academically, are you going to be an asset to our school? Athletically, are you going to be an asset to our school? Okay, those two aside, what else can you do for us? Are you just here to suck money out of us? Or are you here to give something back? And a lot of times you'll see that if they can find that person that can combine all three of those aspects in, that's going to move your file from, the stack here maybe down to a more elite
short
stack.
list. The short list.
Yeah, I think it definitely is important. And some people are kind of shy about community service sometimes. They're like, someone else can do it. Well, if everybody had that attitude, then nothing would get done.
Exactly.
Sure.
So I think it is a component of it, and that's why a lot of colleges now require it, and it gets done now.
And more than just the, couple of hours here and there that the schools. Well, I know Episcopal, I think they expect well above the standard. And what's great, and not just Episcopal, but I see a lot of schools that get heavily involved beyond the requirement, and they're enjoying it. They're getting so much more out of it. I've had kids that have graduated from college that have come back to me and said, oh, yeah, I met so-and-so when I was doing community service work back in high school. We stayed in touch. They were helpful during my college years, and they offered me a position when I graduated out of college. Yep. It was great. So it's a fantastic opportunity to give back to the community, but it's also a great networking path to follow. I mean, let's face it. Very few, as the commercials say, very few athletes in college go on to be professionals in their sport. They're going to do other things, and that's what college is all about. It's a whole experience, not just the sports.
Right.
So take advantage of it and do something good for someone else. Believe me, when it's all said and done, you're going to feel pretty darn good. And I'm not talking about walking or picking garbage up on the side of the road and stuff. I mean, get into some of these other programs where you're interacting with other people and whatnot. I think it's going to be fantastic.
And use your sport. Put on a camp for some underprivileged kids or something like that. I strongly believe if you can teach a skill, you truly know the skill. There's people who can perform the skill and do okay, but until you can teach it to somebody else, you don't really know.
Gotcha.
the skill, and
That's
it helps
a great
you,
point.
and it helps you as well. So if use your passion to your advantage. If you love volleyball, get a camp together. Volunteer at some camps and help out some underprivileged kids.
And talk to your high school coach about helping out or
Right.
reaching out to some of the other coaches. You don't have to necessarily do it within your school.
Right.
You could find other opportunities. There's others out there that would probably work with you to do that. Outstanding. Well, Coach, we've covered a lot of information. Obviously, we could go into great detail on probably just one of the areas that we touch base on. But, we try to give you a good, broad scope. Now, if we've touched on something that you want more information about or is specific to your situation out there, please, any of you out there listening, you can go to viewmysport.com. That's www.viewmysport.com. Click on the Contact Us box in the menu and send over your question. Our guests, our coaches, our board of advisors, we have a plethora of individuals that have great knowledge. So we're not just about talking things in generalities. We're talking about getting down to the nitty-gritty with your situation as well. So we'll be more than happy to break things down for you and offer what our suggestions and opinions will be. Anything we can do to help, please let us know, and that's what we're here for. That's really about it. Coach, do you have any parting bits and pieces? Have we missed anything? For those out there listening and watching, if you had to make sure that they knew one or two things, what are we talking about?
Well, I think, to the parents, be realistic. I see a lot of times where the parents want something more than their kid actually wants to, and they're pushing Division I, where they're really Division III, and at some point the reality has to step in. If the parents kind of remove themselves, and the kid's going to find the right spot.
Right.
If you trust the coaches, if you trust their skill level, they're going to be happy in the right spot. I've sent players higher than they were supposed to go, and they were unhappy, but that's what the parent wanted. And I've kind of changed my approach on that to where we're going to find the right school for you.
Let's make sure they fit, and not just from a sport perspective. And it's hard for the coach to really know, the social scheme or the academic aspect. That's where the parents, I think, really have a good fit. Prepare their child for the social aspect, the academics. Maybe prepare them on how to communicate with the coaches, but leave the skill and the position and the team sport aspect between the kid and the coach, because nobody knows that better. And you're exactly right. The pressure that the parents, the want,
right.
Oh, and boy, we see that across the board.
Because I can remember, I shocked a player and a parents. We were at a Starbucks, and we were trying to figure out what we're going to do with her for college. And she had narrowed it down to 3. It was going to be, I think, Emory, Duke, and UC, Central Florida. And her club coach was there. The recruiter for the club that is in charge of that was there. Parents were there, and I was there. And I kind of sat back a little bit, and I let them do their thing. And they're, oh, this is what you need to go here, you need to go there. Your dad went to Duke, you need to go here, and all this other stuff.
And of course, the club recruiter's thinking, the higher up you go, the more it looks good for us.
Exactly.
Look at what we did.
Right. So, they did their little spiel, and then it came back to me, and I think I shocked her because they're like, well, what do you think, Coach? And I said, if you got hurt tomorrow and you could not play anymore, where would you be happiest at? And everyone just took a step. They're like, well, that's coming from your coach.
How dare you talk about that?
Yeah. And as it turns out, I feel like I jinxed her because that weekend she got hurt. She blew her ACL.
Okay. All right. Okay. Don't write that part.
Yeah. So, but she did. She made her decision based on where she would be happiest. And they actually came back and thanked me and said, you were right. And you had my daughter's best interest at heart, not what was best. I mean, because I would have loved to have said I sent a player to Duke or Stanford or Penn State.
Sure.
I mean, that's a recruiting tool for us as far as kids when they pick their school. They're like, hey, I want to play for that coach.
Well, that's why they call it college sports. This isn't professional sports that you're going. This is college sports, and you darn sure better like the school. You better have your classes figured out. You better understand the social scheme, the size. I had a conversation this week with a parent whose daughter is coming home from the program. They changed coaches. A couple things changed. All of a sudden, it's not what they thought it would be. Their flexibility level is pretty minimal, this particular individual. And so all of a sudden it started kind of hitting the fan in their eyes. And they weren't even – and I asked them. I said, well, okay, well, so maybe you don't want to play volleyball, but what about school? We can get that anywhere. Well, they didn't do their homework.
Right.
They didn't – and so that's a great question, thought process to go through. Parents, you're going to have to check your ego at the door, your ego at the door, and step back and think, worst case scenario. What if that did happen, or what if all of a sudden there's no playing time and do you want a disgruntled, pissed off child just riding the bench who's not having fun and all of a sudden the rest of college means nothing? So,
and that's a big point that you just brought up where, what's your intention going in? Are you wanting to start your freshman year? Mm-hmm. Are you okay riding the bench for 1 or 2 years,
just
coming
being
in
part
spot?
Of the team? Yeah.
Right. So, you might be a Division II starter at a school, but you want to play Division I. Okay, well, that's fine, but understand that you're going to have to pay your dues.
Yeah, define play. Play might be riding the bench.
Right. You've got people in front of you where, and it comes back to kind of doing some research. Look at they've got a setter for the next 4 years.
Yes.
You're a setter. You either need to beat that person out.
Right.
B, understand that you're going to be sitting behind her and not hope that an injury happens, but something happens that gets you in there.
It does happen.
Or
that's a
C,
tough level.
cross that school off the list. Now you're going to have to go somewhere else, or you're going to change positions possibly as well.
Sure.
That's the flexibility aspect to
Sure.
it. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're going through this, and a lot of it sometimes I think may get clouded by coaches, parents, because you've got a lot of different pieces moving in there.
Right.
You've got the coach's ego of, hey, I got this person in this school. You got the parent's ego of, my kid's the best. And then you got the player's ego of, well, I am the best, and people are telling me I'm the best, so I need to be here. So all that has to be kind of checked at the door. What's the best spot for my child?
For all situations. Good. Sure. Well, and we try to talk about that. And last word, the fact is, you can't go to a recruiting service and pay to make all of that go away, because that's not going to happen. I don't care if you write a check for $500,000 to a scouting or recruiting service, or whatever the case may be. They're not going to erase the fact that your kid still needs to be checked in socially, checked in academically. Be flexible, understand, have a plan. Now, college things change. I mean, all of a sudden what was important today won't be important tomorrow. But as Coach Dwyer said, at least go in with some research done. And this is not something that you pay a company. Matter of fact, pay recruiting services, I just think you have better alternatives. ViewMySport.com is one of those alternatives because we give you the tools to educate yourself very easily so you do know what to do in the process. And we're going to end it on that. I think that, again, we can get into a lot more. Maybe we'll have Coach Dwyer come back on another show and talk about some other things. But I think we've shared enough information with you so you get it. You pretty much know the path to follow. And, again, if you have questions or need that specific situation addressed by those that know, please send over the question, contact us, and we will get right on it and get you a good professional answer. May not be the answer you were hoping for, but it's going to be the truth. And that's what we're all about, is delivering the truth in this whole crazy thing called the recruiting world. All right, that's it. I think we're going to wrap things up. For myself, Roger Tillis, the host of The Breakdown, Chuck Olesker, our illustrious engineer and co-host, and a special thanks to our guest, Coach John Dwyer from Episcopal High School in Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom, and we look forward to having you on the show again sometime.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. With that, everybody, View My Sport Nation, all the newbies out there that might be tuning in for the first time, thanks for watching, and we look forward to next week's show. And the next after that, and the next after that, and the next after that. Just remember, enjoy the ride.